Hey there, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And today we are here with some patron-chosen topics, which is awesome. We haven't done one of those in so long. So this week has been an interesting week. Oscars happened.
Yeah,
right?
that was a
Things
thing.
happened at the Oscars.
For those of you who don't know, Will Smith won Best Actor. So congratulations to Will Smith. That is the only thing of note that happened at the Oscars. Nothing else at all, except for that one really quick incident where Will Smith walked on stage on live television and smacked Chris Rock across the face. Kind of crazy, Robin. We don't really dig into a lot of celebrity gossip or news, but what did you think?
I thought it was freaking crazy. I'm not one for violence necessarily, so I thought it was a little bit unnecessary, but everyone's different. Everyone's allowed their opinion.
Yeah, everyone is allowed their opinion, and everyone has their opinion on what happened. Here's what I'll say, whether or not you fall on the camp of he was justified in what he did, or he overreacted, or he absolutely had no right. Wherever you fall into that spectrum, there's steps you can take, I think, before you graduate to walk on stage and slap the shit out of someone. Because after he did that, he screamed at him. He screamed at him twice, very, very loudly. And he should have done that first, If someone's telling a joke you don't appreciate, they're being rude, be like, yo, shut the fuck up. And then if they proceed, then you can be like, all right, we're moving into Slaptown. You guys, everyone heard me tell him to shut up, right? Okay, cool. I'm going to go shut him up now.
There's underlying trauma there.
Yeah, there's a lot more to that
underlying
issue.
Drama.
I will say, I've talked with Will at length since then. I've talked with Chris about everything that happened. And, it's just, obviously I haven't. I'm completely joking. So to talk about something like it is it's deeply personal. But it was made very public by the fact that it was during the Oscars, since 7 or 8 people watched that, and I'm sure everyone clicked over to watch it after that, because it was. I mean, I was playing Dungeons and Dragons at the time, and I saw my Twitter feed absolutely fucking explode on my phone, and then we stopped the game so we could all watch the YouTube clip. So it definitely became the thing of the night that everyone was talking about. So
I mean, he's not Timothy Olyphant. He just can't be like, it was justified.
Wow. You had to work in a Justified / Timothy Olyphant reference. I do love me some Timothy Olyphant, so I can't really blame
Hell
you.
yeah.
That dude is a great actor, and he is very, very handsome.
I agree on both those things.
All right, so speaking of Timothy Olyphant, Robin, I think you're going to be going first for this week's topic. So
my topic has nothing to do with Timothy Olyphant, in case any of you were wondering. But my topic was inspired by the patrons. It was actually the number one topic choice for this particular poll. And you chose ancient mysteries. So this ancient mystery that I decided to cover was that of the Plain of Jars in Laos. And this is said to be one of the most important prehistoric sites in Southeast Asia.
Plain as in flying.
Plain.
Okay. Other plane. Flatland plane.
Flatlands.
The biome in Valheim that'll fuck you right up if you're not careful. For anyone who's played Valheim, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Never played it. Don't know.
You step foot in there and mosquitoes are just like, okay, we're going to one-hit kill you no matter how good your armor is. And as soon as you get to plains, no matter how strong you think you are running for your life. Anyways, I'll let you continue.
So in the upper valleys and lower foothills of the central plain of the Jiangquang Plateau lie what are, or were, thousands of giant stone jars that are kind of scattered throughout the area. So these jars appear in clusters that range from just one jar to several hundred jars. And when I say giant jars, I mean giant. We'll post a picture or a couple pictures on Instagram later. There's one of a bunch of kids standing on one of these jars, and it's not the size of jar that you would kind of place on your kitchen counter with a cute little label sticker on it. They're huge. Researchers also used optically stimulated luminescence, which is a form of ionizing radiation, to date this particular material that the jars are made out of. And this way of dating. It's like specifically for ancient materials, apparently. It is mainly for geological sediment, as well as pottery, bricks, things like that. And this dating resulted in the determination that these jars were placed in this area as early as 12,040, or not 12,040, that would be way, way in the past.
12,040 would be way, way in the future.
12,040 to 660 BC. So that's why I was saying it would be way, way in the past, because we're talking BC. So you guys have to remember that BC is the bigger you go, the further away you are from now.
Right.
So it's bigger to smaller, the closer you get to year 0. All right. 1240 to 660 BC. The jar locations have been divided into different sites, like many archaeological areas. So it's like site 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 52, I think. And site 1 has, it's like the closest to a nearby civilization, and that's the one people go to most. Site 1's been determined to have had its jars transported from a presumed quarry. You know, the place where they dig out rocks? Yeah. So, it's about 8 kilometers away. And they did so, they like determined it by using this detrital zircon geochronology. I've never heard of this before.
I've never heard of that, yeah.
This analyzes a mineral called zircons within sediment.
It sounds like you're making up words.
It sounds so fake, right?
It analyzes the midichlorians in the soil.
So, yeah, it analyzes these zircons, and it can match age and regional tectonic setting deposition. So the sediment from both locations match each other, which leads to the assumption that one comes from the other. There are other sites that have had similarly determined quarry locations in close proximity as well. So it seems like nearby quarry, and then taking these rocks over to where they sit now.
That rocks.
It's definitely a lot of different sciencey research terminology. I hadn't heard a lot of these dating techniques before. Growing up, the only one I'd ever heard of is carbon dating.
You know what's funny is I have a thing that's like how you date something's age too that I had never heard of until this particular one. I was like, is this like carbon dating? Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't ever only heard of carbon dating, but this zircon dating technique apparently has gained popularity since the 2000s. So people like using it now, I guess. So overall, there are over 90 general jar sites. So I guess it wasn't going to 52. 52 is just one of the harder ones to get to. So there are 90 overall general jar sites. Each one of these sites, like I said earlier, can contain from 1 to hundreds of jars. And they vary in size from 1 meter to 3 meters in height and diameter. 1 meter is like 3.3 feet or something like that. Something in that general area. But yeah, so say around 3 feet to 9 feet in height and diameter. And these jars are all made of rock, and they weigh several tons each. I think one of the larger ones weighs up to about 10 metric tons, which is a
lot.
That's a lot of heavy jars. So they are cylindrical, with the bottoms kind of being wider than the tops. They're jars, right? They're round, sloped jars. Some of them look kind of like those beehive-shaped jars that people use for their honey, except without all the lumps on them.
By people, you mean Winnie the Pooh.
No, Winnie the Pooh doesn't have like beehive-shaped jars. They just say honey on them.
Well, I mean, it's still
I guess you could say, they look like those jars. Just not as cute. They don't have honey spilling out of them. Or Pooh Bear sticking out of them either.
They don't have a bare-ass bear hanging out.
Isn't it weird? He doesn't have a shirt, or he has a shirt but no pants. Kind of like Donald Duck has a shirt and no pants, but Mickey Mouse has pants. It's so weird. Like Goofy has an entire outfit. I just don't understand. He even has a hat. Other people don't have hats. What the fuck? Not that it matters. So there's nothing really ornamental about these jars. They aren't covered in fancy fancy carvings, like, you know, how castles and things like that have all that swirly, filigree, fancy things. These jars are just plain old jars. Except for there's one particular jar at Site 1, and this one jar has this carving of what has been called the Frog Man on the outside of it, and it seems like a very Chinese carving when compared to other rock paintings that have been found in China. As Laos is located very much near China, that's not really surprising. So there's a bunch of Chinese art, apparently, that features a similar depiction of a human that kind of has their arms raised and knees bent. And these pieces of art they date back to between 500 BC and 280. So it's quite a ways away ago. And in a similar period as to when these jars were placed. There were 5 rock types that have been identified within these sites. So there's sandstone,
Sand/, Geodude. No, wait.
So there's sandstone, granite, conglomerate, limestone, and breccia. And a lot of the jars are just strictly sandstone. Majority of them are. There's no conclusive evidence as to how the people of the Plain of Jars manufactured these jars. Like, there's no way for us to know how exactly they did it. There are slight shape differences throughout all the different sites. It's assumed that the shapes and designs were kind of based on the region in which the jars are in and how the particular rock could have been manipulated. So maybe depending on the material, you know, is how they decided to create whichever shaped jar they wanted. A lot of people are like, they used iron chisels or other types of tools to kind of carve out the shapes, but there's no way to know for sure because they haven't found any of these like construction sites. There's no tools that have been found in the area. Like, they haven't found a bunch of iron chisels, you know, that are like, hey, this is what they used because we found a pile of them or anything.
Have they looked in the jars?
I'll tell you what they found in the jars in a little bit.
Cool.
So, unlike with many other civilization sites that I'm sure you folks have heard of, where they can find like tools and pottery and things like that, there's really not a lot of the tools here. Each of these jars was carved with a rim, which leads, you know, archaeologists to believe that they all had lids at some point. But a lot of these have lost them over time, and only a few stone lids have been recorded. So a lot of researchers believe that this means majority of the lids, when they existed, were made of perishable materials, things like wood, that would just kind of disintegrate over time, right? In Site 52, there have been lids found with some animal carvings, though it's really rare to find that. And the theme is kind of like monkeys, tigers, frogs, animals. And then with these lids, what?
I just think it's like monkeys, tigers, frogs, you know, animals. It's like, I was trying to figure out what the connection was between them. It's like, oh, the most general connection ever. Got it.
They're like jungle animals. Cause, Site 52 is based mostly in a tree, jungly, wooded area.
Okay.
So, as well as these lids, there are also discs that have been found. And these discs, a lot of people actually confuse them for lids, but they're not. It seems to be that they kind of act as grave markers or something like that. They're placed on the surface over a burial pit. So these discs are kind of like, they just sit there on the ground covering something. And it's assumed that they're marking a grave site. Though these discs are much more rare than the lids and jars. Laos legends tell of a race of giants that once inhabited the area. And these giants were ruled by a king named Kun Chung. And during their lives there, they had to battle a long battle against an enemy that was an evil king named Chow Anka. And the giants were ultimately victorious. So supposedly these jars were full of lao hai, or of rice wine. So they were used to kind of brew and store this rice wine. And they had all of these as a celebration for their victory against the enemy. And in this story, the jars were made from natural materials, including clay, sand, sugar, and animal products in this sort of stone mix. And then they molded these jars. So there's that kind of theory.
So they're giant fucking jars that are super heavy, that are all over this particular region. No one knows exactly where they came from. They've carbon dated it. And the legend, or at least one of them, is that there was a race of giants that had a war with some evil king. They won, and they're like, hey guys, let's get super fucked up. And this is what they kept their celebratory wine in.
Yeah, they know how to party.
Okay, that seems pretty obvious. I can't believe I didn't guess that from the onset.
So, though I want to say that I wholeheartedly believe in the civilization of giants theory, it's been concluded by a French researcher by the name of Madeleine Colony in 1930. And she concluded that these jars were a part of a type of burial practice. So at Site 1, there is what seems to be a natural limestone cave-like formation. There's an opening to the northwest of it, and there's like 2 man-made holes at the top. And it's thought that these 2 man-made holes were sort of like a chimney for what could be a crematorium. Based on the legends of the giants, some believe that the cave is actually a kiln, and that the jars were all like fired in this cave, and they actually weren't carved from singular pieces of stone.
Okay.
So, different theories. So Madeline excavated 12 plain of jars sites and published these findings in a book in 1935. She concluded that these were Iron Age burial sites, with jars having been filled with a black organic soil, colored glass beads, burnt teeth, and bone fragments. And it's not necessarily one to a jar either. There would sometimes be a number of individuals found to be buried together. These materials extended kind of to the outside of the jars as well, which is interesting. So within the jar, you would have cremated remains. And then outside the jar, you would have an average secondary burial, kind of like how we would do things now. So you have the cremated, urns, and then you have your average buried in the ground funerals. In years following, primarily between the years 1964 and 1969, the Plain of Jars area was heavily bombed by the U.S. Air Force operating against North Vietnamese and some Lao communist forces. So there were more bombs dropped on Laos, primarily in this area, than during the entirety of World War II.
Wow.
So this is estimated at about 262 million anti-personnel cluster bombs, an estimated 80 million of which did not explode. So these bombs kind of remained like a deadly threat to local communities. And you can kind of see the damage of these bombs in the area, as there are a lot of broken or displaced jars, and there's a bunch of bomb craters. The munitions from these bombs contaminate more than 35% of the province's total land area.
Wow.
That's
dude,
a lot
that's
of land
insane.
area covered in bombs.
Yeah.
So, Laos and Japanese archaeologists excavated the area and discovered what appeared to be human remains, as well as burial goods like ceramics that surrounded the jars. Between the 1930s and 1990s, there wasn't really any further research into these jars. And then in November of 1994, Eiji Nita from the Kagoshima University and Thongsa Sayavongkamdi surveyed and mapped Site 1. So it was found that these burial pits were dug at the same time as when the jars were placed there as well. And AG he believed that the jars were a symbolic monument to kind of mark the surrounding burials, which conflicts slightly with Madeline, who found cremains in the jars. Thongsa's excavations were backed by the Australian National University, so you knew they really wanted to get down to business. Their interpretation was that the jar was the main person's burial, and that the burials around the jars were like a secondary kind of burial for all the family members. Cremation isn't anything out of the ordinary in this part of the world, so that's kind of understandable. But who would choose to be the person in the main jar? You know, it's just interesting. Because you can't really, there's no way for you to know or to tell why.
I feel like you would choose to be the person in the main jar, and then you would have them just like throw me into the garbage somewhere.
Bury me with my pets. Obviously, there are many thoughts as to why there are bodies both within and around the jars. Madeline notes that the findings are really hard to explain. Like, why would they do it that way, you know? She claims that many of the cremains are of adolescents, though people now are different than people in the BC era. So I'm not sure how they date that, how they figure out, like, are they adolescent or not, you know? I mean, if they were tiny, teeny, weeny bones, you could kind of tell. But I'm really not sure. I'm not a scientist. I don't know. So an archaeologist named Julie Vandenberg was tasked with the bomb clearance operations between 2004, 2005, and then again in 2007. So those bombs that I mentioned earlier, her job was to kind of make sure that these bombs were removed. And her scope of work didn't really involve any emptying of the jars, but she suggested that they may have been used to distill dead bodies, and that the cremated remains represent the most recent phase of the plane of jars, which I was like, what? I don't get that. How does that make sense? I don't know what that means. What this meant was that the deceased would be placed into an urn, like these large jars, during the early stages of a funeral rite. And then during this time, the deceased person's soul would then undergo this transformation. So they'd go from an earthly bound spirit to kind of moving on to the spiritual world. So after decomposition, they're then moved on to cremation or the secondary burial around the jar or jars.
Seems like so much work, like you're basically getting buried twice.
Right.
You know?
The smaller jars were representative of a diminishing need for space to place bodies inside. So that's why there's some much taller ones, and then it gets smaller. But maybe it's because they began with giants, and then over time, the giants got smaller to normal human-sized people. Yeah, I don't know. You never know.
When the giants got smaller, so did the jars, and that's how we have the jars we have today.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And now we can put tiny little people in those tiny little jars.
Wow.
So I don't really think that's particularly the case. Just because why would you have cremains in the jar when the jar is supposed to be just for decomposition, you know? But maybe that's the mystery. Why would you put a body in there, take it out, burn it, and then put it back in? You know, I don't know. It doesn't make sense. But it isn't really known why anything was done in any particular way here with the jars, because it wasn't put down on any written record. There's no language written on any of these jars, you know? There's no record of like, well, so-and-so's in here or whatnot. The most visited of these jar sites is close to the town of Fonsavan, and that's side one. Side one. This is side one.
Flip me over.
So that's site one, and the one that I've talked about most in this episode. So there are 7 jar sites that have been cleared of any unexploded bombs, thanks to the work of Vandenberg and her crew. And these sites are now open to visitors. So that's sites 1, 2, 3, 16, 23, 25, and 52.
Sounds like the lottery numbers.
It does, actually. Maybe you should write that down as, 1, 2, 3 would never win you anything. There's no way 1, 2, 3 is
tomorrow.
a number.
Okay, everyone mark it on your calendar. Tuesday, March 29th, because I'm pretty sure they do a lottery drawing on Tuesday. Those are going to be the fucking numbers, and everyone's going to be like, "Ah, damn it."
So 52 is the largest site so far with about 392 jars. That's a buttload of jars. And it's near a traditional Hmong village that is only accessible by foot. So have fun with that if you plan on heading that way at all. Keep in mind that safe sightseeing of the Plain of Jars can only be done when following clearly marked pathways, as the bombs are still a danger in the area. So there's
so
only
terrifying.
Yeah, it's terrifying. On July 6, 2019, the Plain of Jars was made a UNESCO World Heritage Site, so that's cool. But yeah, there's your ancient mystery for the week. Despite the many theories as to why these exist the way they do, nothing's really known for sure. No, there's no record, no definitive answer. It's not even known which people created these jars, these urns, or how they even transported them there. And it's kind of like the Easter Island heads or Stonehenge, right? Where it's structurally fascinating, these huge, heavy stones. And there's so many of them, right? So how did they do it?
Yeah. Who did it? How did they do it? How did they get there?
Yeah. I would just laugh, though, if the creators of these jars were kind of out there in the ether looking at us trying to figure this out, and they're just like, nah, dog, it's straight up wine storage.
Yeah. Jeez Louise. You people. Unbelievable.
As the human deposits, like the human remains, were made much later than when the jars were created, I really wouldn't be surprised if at first they were used as some type of wine storage, and then later on people were like, yo, we could actually use these to put dead bodies in, you know? It'd be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. That's absolutely fascinating. It is definitely an ancient mystery, so it definitely lived up to the hype. And I want to know what happened, so someone needs to figure it out and tell me.
You're an ancient mystery.
I mean, I'm not that old, but thanks. I appreciate it, I guess. All right.
You're so mysterious.
Am I, though? I feel like I'm an open book. So if you have any questions, just ask. And if I don't want to tell you, I won't. Anyways, good stuff, Robin. Solid way to start out the show. And before we move into my topic, we're going to take a quick commercial break. All right, we are back, and I'm going to go ahead and move into my topic for this week. So this week, as we've already stated, we let the patrons decide what our topics would be. Shout out to all the patrons who voted in selecting topics. We appreciate you, beautiful human beings. And cryptids, I'm talking to you, Mothman. We know you're out there. Thank you for supporting us. So
I wish, man.
Robin covered the ancient mystery as selected by the patrons. We mentioned that it was the top vote getter. The second top vote getter was just the category of demons. So it's interesting because sometimes we give very specific topics for the patrons to choose, while other times we give a category or a subgenre like true crime. I think true crime came in third for this particular poll. I think this is the first time we've put demons on the list, and it came in second place. So it's actually going to get into this episode on the first chance it had. Sometimes when we do polls, Robin will choose the options for folks to vote on. Sometimes it's me. Sometimes it's a mixture of both. For this one, it was Robin. So when I saw the topic just said demons, I had questions. I was like, am I supposed to talk about all of them? Am I supposed to just give a huge list of all the names of demons and let you know what their specialties are? Or am I supposed to talk about the idea of demons? Or maybe some of the rules that they're supposed to follow? Am I supposed to talk about like Demons, the song by Imagine Dragons, because they're clearly from hell? But when you think about, the topic of demons, I have to immediately bring up that there are many folks out there and many different forms of beliefs. And there are those who don't believe demons are real. Demons are very much rooted in religion. So to talk about it would have to be done so carefully. So I'm going to try and do that. And if you listen to this episode and you have an opinion on demons before I get into anything, just know that this whole episode is like exploratory learning as I went through the internet and basically just took what I could find from different books that I could find, different histories and things like that I'm going to share with you. This isn't me saying that any of this is written in stone or fact. The disclaimer of this could all be bullshit is absolutely applied to this. If you would like to share your beliefs with us or the community on this, as always, we encourage that, but please be courteous. because you may believe something different than someone else. When you're talking about religious beliefs, especially, it is a very sensitive topic. And if we're going to share, just remember that you could be sharing something that may or may not be what someone else believes. I recommend starting anything that you want to share with I believe and then what you believe. Or I've always thought, if you don't hold it like so close to yourself that you think it's one of your deep core beliefs, and then what it is. Don't make statements of fact. Don't call other people out and state that they are wrong because they don't believe the same thing you believe.
We don't accept attacking other people in this community.
We've had very, very few things that have ever needed to be moderated on any of our socials over the last 5 years we've been doing this show. So let's just keep it that way. Everyone's usually really good about it. Even though we've had such a low number of incidents, I've definitely personally had to delete a post that was just too much. And I was like, no, this has to come down. And it was about religion. And I was just like, this is why it says like no politics or religion on all of our socials. So because we're going to talk about demons, and demons are rooted in religion very much so, I'm letting just everyone know as a forewarning, be courteous, be respectful. That is the number one thing. But we're going to go ahead after all that said, and I'm going to cover demons. And I'm going to talk about a few, I'm going to do this a very specific way. I'm going to talk about...
You're going to talk about my childhood trauma.
I
got some fucking demons.
We all have demons, right? I'm going to talk about how long human beings have basically talked about demons. Then I'm going to cover one of the more notable demons throughout human history to give you an idea of how the idea of a demon can cross over in different time periods. And that's kind of creepy. I will put up the disclaimer during that. I'm just going to put it up actually right now for the second time. Could all be bullshit. I'm going to talk about my personal thoughts on why I think people became and become convinced demons are out there or are plaguing them. And I'm going to talk about some of the quote-unquote rules that go along with demons, since in this moment, before I look them up, all the stuff that I know is TV and movie stuff. You know, it could all be bullshit that I've seen on TV, seen in a movie. Do they actually hate iron? Maybe. Does the salt line actually work on them? I know you can't feed them after midnight or let them get wet. Don't get them angry. You wouldn't like them when they're angry. You can summon them and dismiss them by saying their name 3 times.
Beetlejuice.
I thought you'd like that one. So there's just a bunch of things out there with rules, and I just don't know how they actually apply. So we're going to end this topic with that. So let's start at the beginning, or what we assume is the beginning. We've talked about the concept of evil a lot on this show. The show is called Scaryish, especially how various societies, cultures, and religions across the world had very similar depictions of evil, despite not having contact with one another. We've mentioned this part on the show that snakes are depicted as a symbol of evil by nearly every single culture worldwide, and especially by cultures that date back thousands of years ago that didn't have any contact with other ones. Snake is like this universally depicted thing of evil. Native Americans depicted the end of the world / universe as a giant snake swallowing the sun. Serpent's Mound, which is in Peebles, Ohio, that you can go visit, is a burials mound that's been shaped to depict this scene. I've been there.
As someone born in the year of the snake, I resent this sentiment.
That's hilarious. So that's not all. That was Native Americans. The snake represents evil in Christianity, most notably in the story of Adam and Eve. If you're not familiar with the story of Adam and Eve, it actually applies across multiple religions, which I didn't know until I looked this stuff up. Judaism, Islam, and Christianity all have the story of Adam and Eve. It's a bit different in its tellings, but it's there for all 3 religions. I'm familiar with the one from Christianity, which is where the snake tempts Eve to bite into an apple. Eating the apple will get them kicked out of paradise forever. And that's
it's an apple from the tree of knowledge.
Yes. So it's just this whole thing where the snake is what's tempting Eve to do this. Apophis, also known as Apep, is the Egyptian god of chaos who opposes light. And he was a massive snake that Ra had to constantly fight off to prevent him from swallowing the whole world and light itself, which is really similar to Serpent's Mound, just saying. Side note, Apophis is notable nowadays because there's an asteroid that's named Apophis that will pass incredibly close to the Earth in 2029. And you got to ask yourself, like, why would you name an asteroid coming super close to Earth Apophis? That's just such a bad decision. Like, this fucking thing
stick its tongue out and lick the Earth.
Dude, it's going to pass so close to the Earth, it's going to go between the Earth and the moon. That is incredibly close to the Earth. Like, it's going to come so
in
close.
2029?
2029. In 2029, it's going to come so close to the Earth that as it passes by safely, which it's supposed to, its orbit is going to be changed by Earth's gravity. That's how close it's going to be.
Its orbit could be changed, but will our gravity pull it enough for it to pull it into our atmosphere?
No, it's just its orbit's going to be changed. Here's the thing, though. When they discovered this thing in the sky and they calculated it, the first time they calculated it, they're like, it's going to be a near miss. It's going to be the closest miss. It's the highest threat level of asteroid we've ever had. It has the record for the highest threat level. And then they calculated further, like, when's it going to come around again next? And based off the projected path, once it's been changed, it was supposed to hit Earth in 2036. And they sounded the fucking alarms. Like, the scientific community was like, everyone needs to check our math, because according to this could be a possible extinction event in 2036. And then everyone in the scientific community checked the math, and they're like, no, it's not going to hit. It's going to come super close again later on, but we're safe for at least 100 years. So
it's pretty much like hooking around, right?
It's just constantly, it's like got slightly different orbit, but it's constantly just passing like Earth, and it's super fucking scary to think that they named it Apophis. And on top of that,
it's like that one movie,
Don't Look Up.
Don't Look Up.
The other thing is, its full name is 99942 Apophis, and the 999 thing creeps me out because
if you flip it upside down,
it's the inverted mark of the beast, which, like, according to a couple sites on the internet, that shit has to be like the actual mark of the beast, which is okay. We're gonna move on. Anywho, demons. So, cave drawings from ancient and extinct civilizations have frighteningly similar representations of what some sort of being would look like that is evil, but is also humanoid. It's not human. It's some form of evil that's taken this shape to mock humanity. It's drawn in this human-esque form. It's almost always, regardless of the culture, completely colored in black, has red eyes, and has horns. And again, a lot of these civilizations had no contact with one another, and that's really creepy. There's an Egyptian leather manuscript that was discovered in 2016 that shows 3 Egyptian demons. 2 of them we had known about through Egyptian writings, but we had never seen a drawing of them until this was discovered in 2016. That manuscript and the drawings within are 4,000 years old. So we've been talking about demons for a very long time. That's nearly as old as the religion of Judaism itself. That's how old this thing is. And as old as that is, and as far back as that goes, it's still not the first depiction of a quote-unquote demon. There's a wooden carving called the Shigar idol that's over 17 feet tall that was discovered in Russia in 1894, okay?
What?
It's this huge, it looks like a totem pole, for those who have seen a totem pole. It has this similar look of a giant head like the Eastern Island things. Like, I thought it was funny that you mentioned that too, except it's not buried. It's supposed to be like this thing that's warning you of like a gateway to the spirit world, but as they started to discover more and more things on the totem itself, they think it's actually depictions of evil spirits or demons. So it has this giant head on the top of it, and this long pole, which kind of represents its body without having arms or legs, has more faces, more like evil-looking faces, like carved into it, and it looks really, really creepy. It reminds me, anyone who's seen the movie Scrooged with Bill Murray, their depiction of the Ghost of Christmas Future, which is essentially, it just looks like a big version of the Grim Reaper. But he opens up his cloak at one point, and his chest has like all these faces on it that are like screaming in agony. And that's kind of what the totem pole reminds me of, or this Shigar idol reminds me of. And it's been studied more and more, and people at this point, like anthropologists and scientists that study the cultures of the past, sincerely believe that this was like a warning to people that there were demons in this particular area, or evil spirits that they needed to be aware and scared of.
Oh, wow.
That said, they used radiocarbon dating with an accelerator mass spectrometer, which is the thing that I didn't know they use nowadays.
There's just so much technology now.
Yeah.
There's so many advancements in, what is it that they measure? It's like they measure the radioactivity of an item, right?
Yeah, they measure,
and that's how they do it.
Like the half-life and how much it's deteriorated or whatever, or something along those lines. And when they did that for this particular giant wooden carving, it dates back 11,600 years, which is almost 10,000 BC. That is a long, long time ago, folks. Like, that's when the saber-toothed tiger went extinct, is 10,000 years ago. Atlantis was still on the map 10,000 years ago, if it existed at all. So
I didn't know Power Rangers existed all the way back then.
Atlantis? There's Power Rangers Atlantis? You mean Stargate
Saber-toothed
Atlantis?
tigers.
Oh, I hate you so much. So needless to say, humans have been interpreting evil or malevolent spirits for a very, very long time. So since they've been around for so long, what are some of the notable quote-unquote demons? Well, one of the most famous demons, especially in recent times, has to be, and we talked about this the other day, Zozo. We've talked about Zozo multiple times on the podcast. We've talked about it in our lives outside the show. He's the Ouija board demon. He's the one that just seems to always be going after people that are fucking around with Ouija boards or spirit boards. There are tons and tons of stories online about Zozo messing with people. Some of them are really scary, who play around with Ouija boards and they're not expecting to have something real happen.
Fun fact, there is a Squishmallow also named that.
I don't understand why they named it Zozo. It's fucking terrifying.
It's so cute. We have it.
There are so many stories out there. He's basically become a pop culture icon, especially on the internet, which to me is bad. Having that much exposure for something that's supposed to be a demon seems not good. Zozo's tactics are supposed to involve convincing curious folks that he's friendly-ish and taunting folks who claim that they're quote-unquote mediums. He also pretends to be the ghost of a little boy who eventually states that there's another spirit in the house that he's afraid of because that spirit is evil. And these are things that have been reported by multiple people who fuck around with Ouija boards, and then eventually it comes out that there's only one thing, and its name is Zozo. So where does this shit come from? Is it just internet stories? You know, that would make sense, right? Well, unfortunately, no. Zozo is actually tied to a very famous possession story nowadays, and it has a significant history. That possession story is of a boy named Roland Doe, also known as Robbie Mannheim or Ronald Edwin Hunkler. If these names sound familiar, it's because I covered his exorcism on episode 60. This is the real-life human being who was the inspiration for the book and eventual movie known as The Exorcist. And the name Zozo comes from a derivative of the name of the demon that supposedly possessed him, and that demon's name is Pazuzu, supposedly. Pazuzu is kind of terrifying. When I wrote this, I was creeped out and I had goosebumps. I have them right now just talking about it. Even to me, someone who is skeptical as shit, Pazuzu has been spoken of and written about by human beings since 3500 BC. These are documented things. There are statues that have been built for Pazuzu by the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Sumerians. They discuss Pazuzu as a god of the wind. Pazuzu is supposedly the son of Hanpu. There's a bunch of different variations of that name, but Hanpu is the god of all evil. And he was the son, but initially, to start with, he was a wind god who kept away unwanted guests and was protective of pregnant women and mothers. So there was some sort of benevolence to this creature, but the depiction of Pazuzu on the sculptures that were made of him back then is like of this winged creature. And what's really, really creepy about this is that depictions of Pazuzu as time went on, and supposedly the things that Pazuzu would do became more sinister. The way they carved him and the way they interpreted him started to change. Depictions of Pazuzu started to have him more bent over with like a hunched posture. Then he started to grow talons on his hands and feet. After a while, they started carving him with a scorpion's tail. So as the legend of Pazuzu, as it were, started to change around what they believed like as they were worshiping him, became more malevolent activity, like they depicted him in that manner as well. And I
did not realize that.
Yeah, and his behavior changed in like historical context. Like currently Pazuzu is known as a master deceiver. He taunts people with information about their own deaths before they happen. During exorcisms especially, he preys on the insecurities and fears of folks that he encounters, which is kind of like a common demon trait. I feel like that's day one shit they teach you in demon school. But he is known to be as one, and like multiple places state this, but one website documents Zozo and Pazuzu behavior across a bunch of different accounts and stories of him fucking with people through the Ouija board, quote unquote, brutally misogynistic. And it's this shift from where it started 3500 BC, where he was the protector of pregnant women and mothers, and now he's brutally misogynistic. It's almost like being the son of, the god of all evil things, slowly started to just like take him in a different direction. And it's this really, really creepy thing that's happened over the last 5,500 years in human history, where this name keeps fucking coming up and it keeps getting creepier and weirder. And it's just something that really, really creeps me out. To this day, the Exorcist research that I did for that episode is the scariest shit I've ever done. Like, just digging into the Pazuzu origin story has me super fucking creeped out again. And we've talked before about how rituals and cultural aspects are absorbed by new cultures and new rituals and new religions and change a little bit. And this one is so odd in the way that it's crossed over from like religion to culture and just continued on and just evolved into a different, scarier version. And with possession in general, I think it's just something that's scary to talk about. And I imagine that the idea of demons and external evil really gained a foothold from people who experienced or who were with those people who were experiencing severe mental illness, especially before we knew what severe mental illness was. Like, as human beings, 3500 BC, if someone had a severe mental illness that was, causing them to act differently or act violently or, just be scary in general, it is understanding that someone could see that, like how someone could just completely change, their personality could change, their behavior could become bizarre and frightening and self-destructive and dangerous, and with no understanding of mental disorders or mental health, think that they were under invasion by some sort of malevolent spirit. Like that makes a whole lot of sense to me. It sincerely does, as to why something like that could come about. But one of the things I've thought about in the past, especially when I was dealing with some of the worst things I've ever had to deal with in my life, is that maybe we are able to understand now, what mental illness is, what a chemical imbalance is, what brain damage is, what paranoid schizophrenia looks like. We can understand what that looks like to a person physiologically. And because we can understand that, we've sort of developed the skepticism rather than looking at maybe what it really means is that we can measure the physical manifestation of what a literal harmful spirit attacking or attaching to a person would look like. Because if you just step outside the box of how we think skeptically for a second and say, if this was a real thing and it interacted with a human being, how would we study it? What would it look like? And I imagine it would look exactly like, some of the things that especially the worst cases of paranoid schizophrenia look like. And it's a really scary thought. And I don't like to think it that often, and I talk about it even less because it really, honestly and sincerely, it bothers me to think about it. It's much easier to just be skeptical about the whole thing and say none of this shit exists. It's something that I think provides people comfort in a very uncomfortable situation, because the alternative is absolutely fucking terrifying to think about. So now that I've dived into my thoughts and brought up some of the things that like creep me the fuck out, according to actual legend and theology, what can you do about demons? Like, if this is something that's happening, whether it's real or not, and you just want peace of mind to know what some of the things that you can do to combat this or to protect yourself, like what's real? Well, objects of holy significance are supposed to have protective powers. It sounds like it kind of depends on the religion you subscribe to, but if you're not a religious person and you find yourself dealing with something like this, holy symbols in general should grant some form of protection. Most believe the protection is strengthened by your actual belief in the symbol. So your skepticism in religion as a whole might not make it as powerful as it could be if it was something that you had faith in. It reminds me of that scene, for anyone who's seen it, in the movie Fright Night, the original with Vincent Price, who's, this dude who's kind of full of shit, and he's holding a cross up to a vampire. And the vampire tells him it only works if you believe in it. And then he starts to believe again, and he's able to drive the vampire out. So lots of cultures also believe in talismans and amulets and holy symbols. One thing I found interesting is that I was reading this study of European Judaism and the talismans they keep for protection from evil spirits. And they counted like all these different talismans and amulets that they discovered within this particular group of folks. And out of every 10 they found, 8 were specifically dedicated to protection from Lilith. Like Lilith,
What?
she's interpreted to be, according to these particular group of people, the mother of all demons. Like, for those of you who don't know who Lilith is, it's very rooted in the Adam and Eve story, that there was an original companion created for Adam, but it was different than Adam, and it was discarded afterwards, and then Eve was created after that. There's variations on Lilith as well, but when she was discarded, eventually she became evil. There's a whole bunch of shit about Lilith. It's a completely separate topic. It's a whole can of worms when it comes to Christianity and all these other religions. But there's this palpable thing about having amulets for protection from Lilith in a specific part of Europe, especially when it comes to the Judaism community. So I thought that was super interesting, that it's a very common thing in certain places to have some sort of amulet or talisman to ward off some form of demon. The other thing that is very, very popular in big portions of the world is called the Hamsa, or the Hamsa. It's otherwise known as the Hand of Fatima, the Hand of Mary, the Hand of Miriam, or the Hand of the Goddess. And it is a very universal symbol of protection that dates back literally thousands of years. It's an image of a hand with all its fingers extended and its thumb tucked in, or not tucked in, but lined up with the fingers, that has an eye on the palm. And I know people who have this tattoo, and they probably don't even know what it is. It's also known as the woman's holy hand, and it's said to represent femininity and faith, and its power to provide great protection from great evil. And I read that, and I was like, who saves the world? Girls. And I think it's super cool. This one is also super old school eyeliner. And you might think, what the fuck are you talking about? Ancient Egyptians believed that makeup prevented evil spirits from entering your body, and eyeliner in particular through your eyes. And it makes sense when I think about it.
And that's why they had that dramatic face makeup. Like,
think about Anck-su-namun from the opening scene of The Mummy and how much makeup she had all over her body because she's supposed to be pure. I imagine the lines are specifically designed to prevent demons from entering her body. And I wonder how true that is. But apparently eyeliner was something that ancient Egyptians believed would protect you from demons. Garlic, in many cultures, believed to ward off evil. Multiple religions, in fact. So put that shit in everything you eat, and it won't be that bad if you hang it all over your house, because it smells good too. Salt, apparently.
You think garlic smells good?
Yeah. Are you kidding me? Like, you start cooking with fucking garlic?
When you cook it, not like when it's just sitting around, or like when you smell like it.
I think if you're trying to protect yourself from a demon, there's worse things to smell like. Also, salt. Salt apparently does help. You can put it in the corners of your house and doorways. You can also throw it over your shoulder and say, no evil eye. Apparently that particular saying comes from some original Yiddish. And if you know the original Yiddish for no evil eye, that's supposed to, like, I guess, help. It's like more powerful speaking it in that to ward you from evil spirits.
Do you know it in
No, I don't know
Yiddish?
any Yiddish.
Imagine if you just keep throwing salt over your shoulder and then your house just starts getting crunchy wherever you walk. Like,
it's kind of funny because I was when I was doing the research, I really kept turning around, like, and just looking behind me. I didn't hear anything. I just felt very uneasy doing the Pazuzu research, and I read that part and I was like, I should just go get some fucking salt and just throw it over my shoulder and say, no evil eye. Burning sage is very common throughout many cultures to drive out evil spirits and demons, including and especially demons in some cultures. Incense burners had a very specific purpose to keep the darkness at bay for some cultures, not just to make the air smell nicer after your stoner brother got high in his bedroom, which I feel is like what it's used for nowadays. And then there's things that are very specific, not universally specific, but very specific to your personal beliefs, like crystals. Some people believe like crystals can hold energy. You can charge them with positive energy and they can protect you. Holy water is very specific to Christianity. There are certain religions that believe banging pots and pans can frighten off evil spirits.
I'm glad you said pots and pans.
Yeah. Keeping your personal demons in check. We talked about personal demons earlier and your trauma. You can't let negative emotion flood your mind, and you can't live in constant anger or hate or despair because demons supposedly feed off that shit. And as a side note, if you think all this is bullshit, so do awful human beings. Awful human beings feed off of that shit as well. People in general can tell when someone else is down or just feeling off or sad or angry. You can sense it. There's just, like the phrase tension in the air is literal. Like it seriously feels like there's something palpable around some folks when they're really having a difficult time.
Have you ever heard of a psychic vampire?
Yeah, I've watched that one show.
No, I'm not about What We Do in the Shadows, but like I feel like in real life there are people that act as those psychic vampires where they kind of gain, pleasure from your pain, and like
I agree.
it's just
I feel like there are folks out there who deliberately start shit in someone else's life because it provides them with a joy that they don't experience somewhere else, which is
right.
sadistic, and it's scary to think about. And there are people out there who they might not be just trying to mess with you, but they might be trying to do something more nefarious, and people prey on that shit, man. Like having that negative, that constant negative emotion flowing through you will make folks who are very manipulative and very frank, to be very frank here, dangerous, see you as a target. And I'm not saying like, oh, you just fake happiness, like fake being happy everywhere you go, because that just doesn't work. But you should try and make an effort to find happiness, even and especially in the hardest of times. And I get it. It is much easier said than done, especially in the context of if you're dealing with a fucking demon, man. But all this other shit that I brought up, all these other steps, all of it is easy compared to doing that. And it's so hard because it is so very important to seek happiness, especially when you don't feel it, because you're seeking something out that can change things in your life and can change things like something that's preying on this negative energy. And this isn't everyone's cup of tea, this next part, and it doesn't have to be. But if you are religious and you believe in prayer, pray. Like, offer up your appreciation for what you have, ask for clarity in what you are going through, and ask for protection from the things that seek to do you harm. I don't care who you are, and I don't care what you believe, and you might not think prayer is a real thing, and that's fine, but from someone in my position, and I am an agnostic, I personally believe that the best thing prayer has ever done for humanity is teach people how to ask for help, because it is so important to do, and so many people struggle to just ask for help. And that's the next thing, is to ask for help. Ask your friends or family member who you think that you can trust with something like this, and just talk to them about what's going on so they can provide you some sort of support, because feeling isolated is something that, and you'll see it in all the horror movies you could ever watch.
Yeah, a lot of horror movies.
It's something that makes people uncomfortable just watching it happen, and you can't help but feel like, I don't know what I would do in that situation. And that's the thing that as I watch stuff like that, I'm always like, be forthright and talk to someone and tell them like, I don't know if this is happening or not, but this is what I've been experiencing, and try and look for support externally. And maybe they can't offer you help, but they can offer you some advice.
That is great advice, not just for demons.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of this shit comes down to. That's not the only things that I could find on the internet about dealing with demons, but like these are the main ones that I could find. Like, I sincerely hope all this shit is fake. Like, I hope none of this is real, and I sincerely hope none of you ever have to deal with anything like this. But just in case, it's as much better to be armed with knowledge. Like, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I think when it comes to demons, that phrase is 100% true. You're always better off being the person who knows the rules in a horror movie than the person who's constantly breaking them. So the last thing I will say, the best way I can find to deal with this stuff is to just lead a good life. You don't have to lead a good life by following a specific set of rules about how much money you need to donate or where you need to spend your Sundays. Be a good person. Drive out evil with love. Drive out darkness with the light. Don't follow people who tell you to embrace hate. We all know Anakin should have known better when we watched Star Wars. Don't be dumb like him. He was married to Natalie Portman, and the dude still fell to the dark side. He threw it all away.
He let the hate flow through him.
He did let the hate flow through him. And I know that's a weird way to end the topic of demons, but that is the end of my topic. So I hope you enjoyed it. Don't at me. Unless you need help, in which case I will be here.
Which reminds me, we got to watch Obi-Wan.
It's not out yet. It's not out until May.
I know. I can't wait.
I can't wait either.
Great.
He looks so good as Obi-Wan.
Oh, yeah. Straight up. Oh, man.
I could talk for days about how the Jedi are kind of the bad guys of the entire Star Wars storyline as well, too. But that's completely different topic for a completely different show. What? My theory about the Jedi being bad guys?
Yeah.
I mean, they literally... Okay. I'm going to take 60 seconds to bring this up, just to hit my high points here. If you talk about the balance being important, but there's hundreds of you and none of the bad guys, that's not balance, and you don't know what that word means. And on top of that, having all these rules to restrict you from feeling joy or love.
But like, the Sith are so strong.
Yeah, you know why?
They're so strong.
Because
there's
so fucking 2 of them. And if there is a balance in the Force where it's like the light always rises to meet the dark and vice versa, and there's 500 fucking Jedi and 2 Sith, those 2 Sith are going to be strong as fuck because they're splitting the dark half that is the balance, and these fucking idiots never thought about that. Did anyone ever show a Jedi a scale and put 500 weights on one side and then ask them, how much would the other 2 weights have to be on the opposite side? And then they might have fucking figured it out. Maybe you shouldn't hunt the Sith to extinction, but anyways, that's my Star Wars rant.
Jesus.
You asked. I said I wasn't going to talk about it, and you asked me to extrapolate, so... All right, that is everything we have for this patron-inspired episode 223. Thank you all for voting and helping us choose our topics. It was really fun and kind of creepy, and I hope you enjoyed our topics. If you have any stories that you would like to send us regarding experiences that you have had, friend, a family member have had, feel free to reach out to us by emailing storytime@scaryish.com, or you can go to our website, scaryish.com, and click on Contact Us. You fill out that form. It does come directly to us. Hit us up on our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. You can join the Scarish Spooky Friends group on Facebook by going to that Facebook. You can also hit us up on Twitter, which is @ScarishPod, or Instagram, which is @ScarishPodcast. Robin, for folks who thought, man, it would be really cool to vote in that poll and tell Robin and Adam what to do, how can they do that?
You can go to patreon.com/scarishpodcast, and those are our monthly donations. Tiers start at $1. At $1, you get ad-free episodes, which you really can't go wrong with there. If you're not into the monthly donation type thing, you can also go to coffee, ko-fi.com/scarishpodcast. All your donations go to helping us keep this podcast going, support us, and help us pay for background fees like website hosting and all that fun stuff.
Indeed. So thank you to everyone who listened. Thank you to everyone who donates. Thank you to everyone who supports us in all the various ways you do. We sincerely appreciate you, and that is everything we have. So Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.